Okay, thank you for joining us, Constance. And our topic today is going to be your way of approaching OCD. You've had a number of really first-class successes using EFT with OCD, right?
Correct.
Yeah. In fact, you sent me several of them, and they're going to go up on our website, etc., for others to learn from. So I wanted to get from you, for our listeners, your approach. I mean, there's a certain underlying theme that you see with OCD clients, and what would that be?
It seems that there's a feeling of not being safe and not being in control.
Yeah.
And they oftentimes relate to particular memories.
Okay, and so like if somebody's not feeling safe, a particular behavior, even though it may be an irrational behavior,
Correct.
tends to give them some, at least temporary, sense of safety.
I think perhaps because it gives them some sense of control,
Hmm.
they then therefore convince themselves that they might be safer. And if they don't do that behavior, then they don't feel safe
Yeah,
in
so
that
they, they,
situation.
they've got to keep doing it and doing it, whatever it may be.
Correct.
And the behaviors go all over the place, including just thoughts.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Um, but
And
until,
certain things will trigger it more than others. Where
example.
something, if a particular man had a problem with a phobia almost of dirt,
Yeah.
he would go into very bizarre OCD behaviors when he would see dirt or touch it.
Hmm.
And so sometimes he could see it and it would be okay, but another time he might see it and it would bother him. It depends on how safe he was feeling at the time, perhaps. And every
Okay.
situation is different too.
Yeah. Okay, and so maybe there is something particularly fearful or stressful or something in their life at that time, and
Mhm.
so they're much more likely to then revert into these various behaviors.
Correct.
To feel.
And I see OCD as almost a loop. They can't. This thought goes in, or this behavior, this feeling, and it's like they can't quite get out of that loop. And
Yes.
that's where you can use OCD. I mean, sorry, EFT to help them pull out of that loop in order to feel safe in a different way.
Yeah. Now, I've read many of your write-ups here, and they're very, very impressive. Some of the things that you do to get them out of the loop. Um, I mean, there's some practices you use with people, but it varies for the person. But in essence, you end up getting to or discovering specific events that seem to be underlying all of this.
Correct.
Okay.
And for one person, there might be, five different events that attribute to a different behavior or a
Yes.
different thought pattern.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not always instantaneous. You fix one, you work at one memory and all of a sudden they have no OCD. They may have other memories that trigger a different type of behavior or a thought pattern.
Yes. And that smashes which I love to smash this myth. Okay, this myth that EFT is a 1 minute wonder. Oh, gee, tap tap tap, and our OCD is gone, or our PTSD is gone, or this, that, or the other thing is gone. I mean, that's that does work, by the way, for some cases on some issues like headaches and this kind of thing. But that's
Correct.
really not what professional EFT is about. We've really got to get in there and dig into these specific events, get to the causes rather than these symptoms. Okay.
Right.
Now,
With OCD though, I do work with the symptoms as well. So, and that's one of the areas where other type of issues I may not. With OCD, it seems beneficial to work with the event and the symptom in combination.
okay. Now I noticed that at least in one of the write-ups that you sent, and there was there was light switching. That was one of them. But there was another one where you had a whole series of things that you would do dealing with the symptoms. And I meant to ask you because it wasn't clear in the write-up in your article. Did you do the specific events before the symptom approach, or did you do the symptoms before the specific events? Do you remember?
It depends on which one. Sometimes I do. Are you talking about the one where the exiting the bathroom? He had to do like 5 or 6 different things?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Um, that particular one, I believe we did the specific event. I mean the specific pattern first
Okay.
because he didn't know what the event was.
Yes.
So we went into the specific, how would you feel if this was out of place? And then we tapped on the feelings, the emotion involved with it. And as we went, cleared out some of those emotions, then he remembered the event that sparked it. Then we worked on the specific event. But we only did one. He had a pattern of, I think, 5 or 6 different things that he had to do every time he would exit this room.
Yes.
We did one of them, and then we got to the specific memory. He healed with that specific memory using EFT, and then the next session, I asked him about the other, 4 or 5 things that he had to do, and he went, "Oh, I forgot about those."
Yes. We,
So one table leg
yeah. Yeah.
with that whole
Out of the.
series, that one particular OCD behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it didn't take away all of his OCD of all events, but that one pattern that he had, that one behavior he had, that repetitive, that ritual, as he calls it.
Yeah.
We did one of them, and they
Yeah. And that's an interesting example of what we call our generalization effect. And that's a pretty powerful use of it, because with OCD, I wouldn't expect to have one OCD thing just travel over all of them. I think that's, at least in my experience, the unusual case, but it certainly happens. And
that was in the one ritual.
Yeah.
But by collapsing that one ritual, didn't collapse other OCD behaviors.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Great. All right. Now let's get to, if we can, ways that you find the specific events, the underpinning, if you will, the causes of these various issues. Oftentimes you'll ask the client, when do these behaviors start? And they'll give you an answer,
Mm-hmm.
And you can say what was going on about that time, and they'll give you an answer,
Mm-hmm.
and you're right then on target for finding a specific event.
Correct.
Doesn't always happen that way. Okay. Sometimes they say, I don't remember anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they've repressed it. Maybe they just don't know it. But I was impressed with how you would discover them. Give us you have a variety of creative ways of doing it, but just give us one. It's in one of your articles and write-ups, but it has to do, I call it, with the little boy with the pencils. Here's a little boy who could not remember any kind of an event that might be causative to the behaviors. But tell the story.
On that particular one, I don't know if he remembered or not, because he was so autistic that he wasn't talking. He wouldn't communicate.
Okay.
His parents had no clue as to what happened. They knew about when it started, but they didn't know what the event was.
Sure.
And the boy was not verbal. I think he was 7, but he wasn't verbal. So he wasn't able to tell me. Okay. So what I did was I lined up a bunch of pencils on my desk, and I invited him to go ahead and play with them. And immediately he lined them. He took about 10 minutes lining them up perfectly, making him very, very nervous and fretful about lining them up perfectly, very carefully. And I talked to his mother while he was doing that. And so then he had them all lined up perfectly. I said, "How would you feel if I moved that pencil?" And I pointed to a pencil. And his eyes went wide, and he looked kind of freaked out and then looked kind of angry. So I started tapping, and he let me touch him, which he hadn't. For some reason, he let me touch him, and I was able to tap on him. Otherwise, I would have just done tapping on myself or his mother, or have his mother tap.
In a surrogate way.
Correct.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I was able to tap on him. He wasn't functioning in a way that he could do his own tapping. So I tapped on him, and at one point I had his mother tap on him. But I started tapping, even though if we move this pencil, I feel really angry. And so we went through, and then the different emotions where I saw sadness. So I start talking about his emotion of sadness. It would really upset me if that pencil were moved. And then I asked the question, and it was a little bit out of context, but I said, how would your mother be okay if I moved that pencil or something like that? And he started bawling, he started crying, sobbing, and had this horrible look, this frightful look on his face. And he looked right at me, or I don't think he looked at me, but he said, it's my fault mommy got hurt. It's my fault mommy got hurt. It's my fault mommy got hurt. And one of the things his parents said is he repeated a lot. And so
I need to stop you 1 second. Explain to me. I thought he was nonverbal. Did he manage to say something verbally here?
He did. He did talk somewhat to his parents.
Okay.
But he wouldn't talk to most people. And when he did talk to his parents, it was very, very minimal. Okay. And he tended to repeat last words of a sentence. Okay. That was his pattern. But he normally didn't speak in public. Yes. He wouldn't speak at school. He wouldn't speak to his friends. He only spoke to his parents.
Okay. But he was saying this thing now about mommy being hurt.
It's my fault. It's my fault. Mommy got hurt. It's my fault. Mommy got hurt. So I started, just tapping on that emotion. But I asked his mother, kind of gave her a question. Do you know what this is? And she immediately said, did you see me in the living room of our old house? And he had. And did you want me to tell this story?
Well, we can shorten it up a little bit. There was basically a burglary where she was tied up, mm-hmm. and the little boy witnessed it, but mother didn't. Mother thought he was sleeping.
Correct.
And so
it was his fault because he hadn't put his toys away.
Yes, which is an irrational thought. He's a young boy, autistic, and all of this as well. Mm-hmm. So therein becomes the cause, if you will, of these OCD behaviors. Mm-hmm. Okay. Right. Go on with the story. I mean, you tapped, I gather, on those emotions as best as you could understand them given the circumstances. Mm-hmm.
I had his mother tell the story.
Okay.
Of what happened. And we tapped on the boy as his mother was telling the story. And I basically used as a cue what his facial expressions were when he tightened up, and then at that point he started talking a bit more. And mm-hmm. he started telling me, I didn't put my toys away. I didn't put my toys away. So I started tapping on that. And he thought he was a bad boy, that sort of thing.
Yes.
So he calmed down. He was able to look me in the eye. He was so tied in that he thought because he hadn't put his toys away and he hadn't obeyed his mother by taking the nap, that he thought it was his fault that his mother got tied up.
Yes. Okay. Fabulous. But that's the kind of thing that just doesn't show up on the table. And that is one of the reasons why conventional therapies and EFTers, etc., who have this powerful tool, really aren't able to get as far as they maybe could because they haven't gotten to the cause. And so that's where the art of EFT comes in. And I commend you for that art. You got to tune into the client, use a little creativity sometimes. And even with somebody who's not as disadvantaged as this young boy, an adult who is perfectly able to converse with you, etc., even then they don't remember things, and you still have to be creative sometimes, use your intuition, have them make something up sometimes, and so on, right?
And they may even remember it, they just don't make the connection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Too subtle, no connection at all. Okay.
And for anybody doing it, use your intuition.
Yes.
Put yourself out there a little bit to use your intuition. It's okay if you're wrong.
Well, yeah, and amen. I'm using it all the time, and I'm not always correct, but you have to. I've developed some trust in my own. You've developed some trust in yours. But the intuition now brings me to this other point that I want to talk about. There are also cases where you just simply weren't able to find, by whatever means, the specific event, but you got an intuitive hit. I'm thinking of the one where you asked this fellow who was obsessive about dirt. We talked about that before. Mm-hmm. You got some hit about his mother being in a garden, some intuitive kind of thing. Tell that story, would you?
He had a horrible dirt phobia, as I mentioned, and he could not remember where it really started. And he started. I asked him a time where he felt stressed, and he goes, "Well, I've had it long before this, but my high school graduation, some guys dumped dirt on me."
Yeah.
And so we started tapping on that, and then I just had the sense that it had more to do with his mother.
Hmm.
So I went off that subject and or that incident, that event, and I asked him to tell me a little bit about his mother, and he said, "Well, my mother died when I was a teenager." Well, that happened to be the time when he first was diagnosed with OCD as a teenager. So I started asking him a little bit more about his mother, and I said, "Do you have any association with your mother?" And nope, none at all. And then I just had the sense that she was in a garden, that she gardened. And so I said, "Did your mother like gardens? Did she have a garden?" He said, "Oh yeah, she loved gardens." And that's what started the memory to remember that when his father and mother told him she was dying of cancer while she was working in the garden.
Yes, and
He has very exacting memories of the upset.
and if I recall your article, there was even some description of him imagining digging into the dirt frantically, but somehow or other this dirt and this garden and his mother's death all got put together in a way
Correct.
where you need to be clean and dirt is bad and
He thought dirt was the conductor of death,
yeah, okay.
is his phrase. And so when we were able to heal the issue of where it got stuck, where the dirt was a conductor of death, he was able to. I brought dirt in the office.
Okay.
We actually went out and he played in the dirt at the end.
So let's back up here a little bit because this is a very important thing, especially for people listening in to think of this whole intuition bit. Um, uh, who knows if you could turn back the clock and you didn't have this intuitive hit, if you'd ever really have gotten to that. Maybe you would have by some creative means, maybe not. But if you didn't get to that, then chances are your ability to collapse the OCD as well as you did may not be there. What do you think about that?
I think that there are other ways, and I think that eventually a person would get there. I think that it may have taken a lot longer.
Yes.
So, for instance, as I would be getting to know him more, I would have known more about his mother, and we could have started talking. I mean, there are other ways to do it. One time I did a woman who didn't have a memory about being kidnapped when she was 4, or she was 9. But she didn't have any memory of it. She knew she'd been kidnapped, but she had no memory of it. So we tapped on, even though I don't remember,
Yes.
and even though I'm afraid of what I don't remember, and then she still couldn't remember. And I said, "Do you ever dream about it?" Well, she happened to have a dream, so we tapped on the dream, and
Uh-huh.
it turned out that
Okay.
the dream was very, very accurate to what had actually happened. So there are ways around it. There are ways of unearthing it, listening to what the person says. Sometimes their choice of words are
Yes.
very telling, and you can. It's almost like being an investigative reporter. You go in
Yes.
there and try to figure out where is this connected. I think
Yeah.
intuition makes it so much faster and easier,
We, we,
but there are other ways.
we call all this investigative reporting and EFT detective work.
Yes.
And it's important, and you get better and better at it as you get more experience. But let me get on the intuition side. Yes, you get this intuitive hit. If you go with it, oftentimes you're right on the dead center of the target, on the bullseye, and it just saves you lots of times to get right down to it, and there you are. So somebody listening in would say, well, okay, Constance just has all this intuition. Or they may look at some of the stuff I've done on film and they say, well, Gary just has all this intuition. And in fact, our intuition is no different than anybody else's. You and I trust it maybe more than some others do. But I want to segue, if I can, from that intuition into the optimal EFT process that we're developing here now within EFT, which is the ultimate. It's bringing spiritual work into the process. And if you'll think about it, out of all the possibilities, just before you got your intuitive hit about what could have happened, they were infinite number of possibilities. And if you were relying only on your own experiences and only on just the things that may be in your own knowledge, specific knowledge base, you're very limited. But if you allow it to open, you have an infinite possibility. You've got a computer with this massive database, which you can now access, and you push the right buttons and bingo, here comes the garden issue. Right? And so that's a matter of practice, but it's also a matter of, I think, some spiritual practice. You've had a lot of spiritual experience and practice yourself, I know, from background. So have I. Okay, and I think that has something to do with getting to these spiritual hits. Would you agree, disagree? Give me your thoughts.
I absolutely agree. I think guidance from that spiritual source is invaluable. And the other part of it is that because we're connected, that my clients sitting in front of me, when I connect with them in a spiritual way, then their stories come to life.
Yes.
Because I'm connected with them. It doesn't mean I take it on, but I connect. I can sense things in there because we're basically, one. We're all God's children.
Yeah, and that's one of the spiritual threads, if you will, running through optimal EFT, is this fact, which is now even been proven by science, our quantum physics, that we are indeed all one. We are not separated at all, as our senses clearly report. Okay. We are connected, and that person is actually you and you are them. It just does not appear that way. But if we can blend with that client, I don't know if that's the right word or not, connect with them, be part of them, these things just show up much more easily, So anyway, I think it's a nice intro, Constance, to the various articles that you're writing here on OCD and perhaps other topics. And so, anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think it's just, I just encourage people to really, become open to guidance, to use your listen to what comes through and practice with it. Spend some time clearing out the cobwebs and letting that come through. And like you said, there's nothing different about your or my intuition than anybody else's. It's just a matter of practicing it.
And trusting it is a term that I use. There's a phrase I used to use long ago when I first started EFT. And that was, I would say, EFT properly done is not done by you, it's done through you.
Correct.
And that's an interesting, nice little turn of a phrase, which is nice to talk about at cocktail parties. It's one thing to academically discuss it. It's another thing to own it. And once you own it, it turns a corner for you. You're in a brand new door with new vistas. So anyway, Constance, so glad to talk to you. Thank you for your wisdom. My gratitude.
Thank you.